Hey, what's up, everybody? This is vlog number two, numero dos. And I know it's been a while since my last vlog. A lot has gone on, and the bottom line is this vlog is going to happen regardless because it's something that is inside of me that I want to kind of let out into the world. I'm going to be talking on this vlog about my life. I've had a really exciting life. I think like a lot of you, nobody remembers or nobody knows about your life when you're gone. And I want this sort of to be like my book, my confessional. And also, it's going to be also about what's happening now eventually. So the idea is to start from the beginning and then end up where we are today, end up like in real time. And then talk a little bit more about the future. The exciting thing about this vlog is going to be that this is a Mexican-American story. This is an American story, and it's a world citizen story because where I am at now is I'm going to be living in different parts of the world, mostly Latin America, but it's going to be about the travel that I do, living day to day, some of that, for you guys to get a perspective. And then also, I think that, as Mexican Americans, as Latino Americans living in the US, we don't get a lot of perspective because I know there aren't a ton of Latino vloggers from the US. There's a ton from Latin America, but not a lot from the US. And there's reasons for that, which I'm going to be actually talking about. So why do you want to follow this vlog? Again, this is a Mexican American story. And it's the story of lots of struggle and triumph over struggle, overcoming obstacles, self-realization, spiritual awakening, and just a ton of stuff that I think a lot of Latino Americans and also just Americans in general and the world in general would get a lot from. So let's start out from the beginning. First of all, I landed here in Medellin, Colombia early this morning or late last night. And it's been a dream of mine for a long time to travel when I was 50. My idea was to retire at 50 and to travel the world, not to wait till I was 60 or 80 to travel when a lot of Americans travel at that time, because that's when they retire. And I still want to be able to hike, I still want to be able to party, I still want to be able to have a good time. And this is a perfect age for that. Because of the pandemic, I'm a little late to start on this journey, but it actually happened. Everything happens at the right timing. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about here is my spiritual awakening, which has included a lot of deep sort of soul work. And then also I've been meditating. This is another really important part. I've been meditating for 32 years, and meditating for that long gives you some perspective and it gives you some insight. And I'm going to be talking about some of that because you're able to tap into sort of the collective consciousness, and you get answers from just the consciousness, which is all within. You get answers from the universe, from the world, all within, which is another thing that I'm going to be talking about, is getting answers for a lot of your questions, because sometimes those answers aren't in the Bible, sometimes those answers aren't in books, and a lot of those answers are within. But how do you do that? How do you go within if you're full of trauma and you can't even sit down for more than a few minutes, with a blank state of mind, which is what you have to do. So let's get started. I was born in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, which is a beautiful, beautiful part of the Pacific side of Mexico. If you don't know where it is, take like the very tip of Baja California, which is Cabo San Lucas, all the way west to the Pacific, you'll find Mazatlan. It's in a state, Sinaloa, which is known for a lot of beautiful things, food. I remember Mazatlan as a kid. I left Mazatlan when I was about 4 years old. I think I was getting close to 4.5, something like that. And I do remember, as a kid, running to the beach. It's a beach town. It's kind of a touristy, town. I remember, some of the images that I have are of the ocean, of the beach. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that right now, and then how my family ended up in the U.S. and how that happened. It's a story that a lot of Latinos, a lot of Mexican Americans have as a common sort of thing that connects us. Again, it's not talked about a lot. So my idea is to talk about it, and also to hopefully some of this stuff resonates with you and you're able to relate to it and know that you're not alone. And then also, now, I'm not going to be speaking in Spanish on this vlog. I know that a lot of Mexican Americans speak Spanish, and because it's very unique, I think, to the Mexican American experience. A lot of Mexican Americans speak English. So I'm going to be doing this vlog in English. So I'm going to take you from Mazatlan into the US, how I became, a highly paid executive in corporate America, then a successful entrepreneur, then a world citizen, a world traveler, a nomad. So when I was a little kid in Mexico, I was born, and then a couple years later after I was born, my brother was born. So I had a little brother. And like many Mexicans living in Mexico that are trying to eke out a living, parents many times have to make a hard choice because they want to be able to provide for their family. And that includes, a roof over your head, includes food, utilities, shelter. And it's the majority of Mexico can't really afford the wages to live on the wages and to provide for a family. So a lot of people turn to, obviously, to selling drugs. Although that's not a vast part of Mexico, it's just a very tiny part, but it's still a significant portion. Obviously, you've heard the news, and it is lucrative. So a lot of people risk their lives and do that. If you're a mostly white, rich family that inherited money over the years because your ancestors came and basically, this is really tough. So I'm going to be talking about this stuff too. Is your ancestors basically raped and killed and stole land, and as a result, you have there's a lot of rich white, families still in Mexico that benefited from, not that they did it, obviously they didn't do it, but they benefited from past family, members that reaped the benefits of land, of gold, of, natural resources that obviously made them very wealthy. And it's a very tight-knit group of, like many countries, you have the rich and then you have the poor. There's very little in between. Although that's growing a lot now in Mexico. There's a huge sort of that in between. The middle class is growing, and that's what made America great, is the middle class, and that's actually starting to come down in the U.S. and in Mexico that's starting to come up. But back in the early 70s, when I was a kid, it was still very much rich and poor. My family, they had a small business. My mom and dad fell in love and, got married. And then they moved into my dad's parents' house, where they, a lot of family, and this is also very common in Mexico, is you have multiple families living in one house. You have, brothers and sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandpas. it's kind of a mix mash of different families, and that's the way it was in my family. I'm going to be talking a lot about this too. A lot of parts that are endemic part of the Mexican American culture and Latin American culture, but I'm going to be talking more specifically about Mexican American culture, and I will dive deeper into some of these topics. Just not now, because I want to kind of give you an overview, and then as we move forward, talk more about this stuff. So, like many Mexican American households, we don't get therapy, we don't get antidepressant prescriptions. What many of us do is we drink. We use alcohol sort of to numb pain, to numb our current circumstances. And it works for a lot of people until it doesn't work, and then you got a lot of health issues, and you got a lot of other family members that suffer as well. And that's generally what happened with my family. Is the house that we were in was my dad's parents' house, and my dad's dad was an alcoholic. Sometimes he'd get into these rages. And that's really what drove us to leave Mazatlan. It was the impetus, but it was also financial. So when my parents were in Mexico, my dad moved to the U.S. to work and provide money for us so that we could live. And it was a really tough decision from what I hear, from what I understand. It was a very tough decision for my parents to make, because my dad had two little kids. I had essentially a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And now being a father, I can't even imagine leaving my kid for that long. I have a 2.5-year-old now, and he's the light of my life, and he's everything. And I can't even imagine my dad at that time, deciding to go to the U.S. to work and not see his kids every day. Now we have WhatsApp, we have video, all kinds of video capabilities, and being able to call for nothing. You couldn't do that back then. It was a ton of money to call on a phone booth or at your home phone, your landline. And, it would be sometimes hundreds of dollars to have a hours conversation. It didn't happen. There was not a lot of communication. And then him being undocumented in the U.S. also didn't avail for him to go back home and check on his kids and his family. The reason why my dad had to leave, or why we had to leave with him, was because of the use of alcohol and how people cope, how a lot of Mexican Americans cope with depression, with anxiety, with guilt, a lot of these bad emotions with a lot of these, I don't want to call them bad emotions, a lot of these emotions that are tough to deal with and to sit with. So my grandfather was orphaned at a really young age and was homeless when he was little. And again, this speaks to the poverty in Mexico and to a lot of the world, in that you don't have an example of what a dad should be. You don't have an example of what a family should be. And then at the same time, you're dealing with a bunch of the mental sort of the PTSD of having to grow up on the streets as a kid. I don't know the complete story, but I heard that it was tough. He learned how to basically make it on his own on the street as a kid. And if you don't have a dad, a good dad to show you how to raise your kids, and then you're dealing with a lot of the emotional trauma of having to not have a family and to be homeless as a kid, what do you turn to? you don't turn to antidepressants or to a therapist. You turn to alcohol to sort of numb the pain. And that's what he did. He became, an alcoholic. I don't know how early on in his age, but definitely early enough to cause him to be addicted to alcohol. Because what I understand, and I remember as a little kid him drinking, and how he would act, and he would always be different when he drank. This is an example of a lot of Mexican Americans that end up moving to the U.S. There's alcoholism in the family, either in the current family or in the previous family, which causes lifelong trauma. And if you don't deal with that, it causes other issues, health issues, and family issues, and work-life issues. And I was able to overcome a lot. A lot of these issues affected our family, but I was able to overcome a lot. And that's actually what I'm going to be talking about here too, is how did I overcome, probably some generations of a lot of trauma, and also alcoholism and abuse. I remember having a pretty good life. As a kid, you don't really remember a lot of the bad things. Because you're a kid, poverty doesn't really, in retrospect, obviously now I remember some things that if you're not in poverty, you don't experience. But I remember, for example, as a kid, even as a 3-year-old, again, these were different times, a different place. But I remember as a 3-year-old running, we lived pretty close to the beach, probably maybe 2 or 3 blocks from the beach. And I remember running to the beach and spending the day there. My mom had a newborn, and I'm sure she didn't have the time or energy to take care of both, having to nurse one, and what do you do with the other one? I remember running around the streets at 3 years old. I remember even seeing a skeleton at some point on a street. Just very weird things that would happen. Again, a lot of them because we were poor. It's just the life that we led. But now looking back, man, I was I was experiencing poverty. So I remember going, for example, to the beach in Mazatlan, and playing close to the water. And I remember this is just a memory that I is very distinct. I remember digging up turtle eggs, which is now obviously completely illegal. And at the time, it wasn't illegal. And at the time, I didn't know. I was a 3-year-old. What are you going to tell a 3-year-old? And it was an accepted thing at the time. These kawama eggs. These are huge sea turtles that would come lay their eggs there on the beach. And I remember hunting for these big turtle eggs, and then taking them back home and boiling them up and putting. If you've never seen or felt these turtle eggs, these sea turtle eggs, they're kind of leathery. And I remember peeling the top, boiling them a little bit, and not completely, just enough to still be liquidy, and putting salt and lime, and just drinking those, and they were just so delicious. That's one of the most distinct memories that I have. Now you can go to jail if you do that, so don't do that at home, kids. But I remember that. I remember running around on the street as a 3-year-old. I guess parents would do that with their kids. The community would sort of raise them, or it was just okay, to do. And I can see that the sun started to come in, so I apologize for the way the sun kind of on my face here. But so, while this is happening, while we're at, my grandparents' house, I just can't even imagine For those of you that have kids or even think about having kids, like, to have your kids living in a different country and you're undocumented in the country that you're living and working in now, just so you can provide food, shelter for your family back home, to not be with your wife. I just can't even imagine like that, how painful that must be to live that every day. It must be incredibly hard. I could see it being lonely. I could see it being, a torture. And now speaking to my dad and recounting some of those stories, he did have, he did get depression. It was very hard for him. And he talked about how a couple times he had to go back home, and just the anxiety of crossing back over the border. And he tells us this, and my parents tell me this, but I don't remember this. And this must have been really difficult too, that he would go back to visit us, and then I would reject him as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old. I would reject, my father, because I hadn't seen him, and we would be a stranger. So could you imagine, like, you're working your butt off in another country, and then you go back home and your kid doesn't even remember you? I mean, oh man, it's just, I can't even imagine. So these are the things that a lot of Mexican Americans and Latino Americans face in the US. And, he recounts, like, coming back to the US and crossing the border as an undocumented person, and just like the anxiety of that and the panic that would instill in him as he's figuring out how to cross and paying what they call the coyote, or the person that sort of helps you cross. Like, wow, man, just so now not only do you have kids back home that you're sending money to, but if you go to jail and they catch you, like, you're not able to provide for that family. Could you imagine the anxiety that must, stir up? I can't, like I said, I can't even imagine. But these are the things that my parents had to go through. My dad, I'm just so proud of him. Despite growing up the way that he did too. Having an alcoholic, dad. And this is something else that, a lot of Mexican Americans don't talk to is, getting beat and being called names is just a common thing. And what that does to a kid's and then an adult psyche. These are perpetual sort of life wheels that keep repeating. And if we don't stop them, they keep going, and they keep affecting other families, other lives. And I think it's time that Mexican Americans, Latinos, and just people in general start to deal with trauma in a different way besides, hitting the drugs and hitting alcohol. And my dad didn't know any better, but, he perpetuated the cycle. My grandfather would drink to the point where he would sort of lose himself. He would, become abusive, and abusive towards, other family members, in front of other family members. And what that does to other kids, and what that does to the family members when they see, one family member berating or beating up physically another family member, what that does trauma-wise to people. So, my grandfather was one of those people that used alcohol to cope, and then in coping, alcohol makes you do things that you wouldn't do when you're not drinking, and he would become violent. And this is common in the Mexican American culture. that, you take it out, you take out your frustrations that you're unconsciously taking out on your family members that happened, when you were a kid or when you were younger. And that's what my grandfather did. He would, he would beat up my dad. And of course, this is all in sometimes under the auspices of like, corporal punishment or raising your kids the right way. By the way, it's never okay to beat little kids. It's never okay to beat anybody. That's not okay. And my dad, he would tell stories where he would pee. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but he experienced lots of trauma from his dad. And my dad, to this day, adores his dad. He loves his dad. But some of the stories that he tells of the, just the corporal punishment that he endured was just like something else. I mean, it was just ridiculous, the amount of abuse that he suffered. And one day he got into these into one of these rages where my grandfather, for whatever reason, decided to take out his frustrations or whatever on my mom, and there in the household just started beating her. And could you imagine, like, so my dad is in the U.S. and his dad, my grandfather, is beating up my mom, his wife. I mean, I can't even like begin to, and then you can't go there and take care of it right away. So he did end up taking care of it. The way he did is he moved us all to the U.S. That was the main impetus for moving the whole family to the U.S. That's where we're going to end episode 2. Some of this stuff is really hard to tell. It's hard to retell some of these stories, but I think it's necessary to retell some of these stories. And I hope that me telling these stories is going to help you guys relate and help you heal some of these traumas that a lot of us face, and learn how to heal. This is a healing journey. The ones that I'm going to be, the stories and the story that I'm going to be talking to you guys about is in the end how to heal from all this stuff, and how to overcome, and how to not let it, just completely destroy you. So, peace till the next episode.